Mark Hamrick for some insight. Good morning to you, Mark.
Kirsten.
Okay, so we're talking about what's known as the Social Security Cost of Living Adjustment. It's also known as COLA, usually announced around this time. Now, with the government shutdown, no announcement has been made. So what does this mean? Should our Social Security recipients be worried at this juncture?
Well, I've got breaking news. We got the announcement this morning.
Yeah.
So we know that it's 2.8% in 2026. And that's because this morning, in a sense, amid everything else that's happening, the Labor Department took the extraordinary step of releasing the Consumer Price Index about 10 days late. And the Consumer Price Index is used to tell us how much that cost of living increase will be. Interestingly enough, 2.8% is below the average. And so the average is about 3.1%. And I think most Americans, probably everybody watching right now, would say, I don't feel like this is a below average cost environment. Prices haven't come down, but that's the reality of what we're working with.
And what the reality also is that we're in the midst of what could be the longest government shutdown. Will that have any bearing on folks' benefits?
Fortunately not. It does have a bearing on the real economy, but Social Security is one of those things that is kind of in its own world in the sense of the payments do continue. And, you know, if there's anything that would get Americans riled, it would be the lack of access to the Social Security benefits. And let's remember, they paid into the system, into the trust fund to get this money. So it's, in a sense, their money.
That's right. So let's talk about the wildly fluctuating rate that we get. In 2022, it was 8.7%, then 3.2% the following year, and 2.5% in 24. How are people meant to sort of plan for themselves when this shifts so dramatically year to year?
Well, I think the question is a great representation of how we do need to approach this, in that the world is a volatile place. Everybody who's watching this knows that, and no more so than it's been in the last 5 years with the pandemic, with the shutdown, with the red-hot labor market and inflation that followed, and elevated prices that continue to this day. You know, just this morning, we had the Consumer Price Index released, as I mentioned, and that's up 3% year over year, and people are sort of applauding that, saying, oh, it's cooling. Well, the prices continue to go up. And so what you really do need to do is prioritize emergency savings. Most Americans live paycheck to paycheck. That is not constructive. We need to do a better job of saving for retirement. You know, we just released a survey at Bankrate that finds that 52% of not yet retired Americans believe that they will be reliant on Social Security to pay necessary expenses. And 4 out of 5 currently retired individuals say they are that reliant on Social Security. So we can control what we can control, and for those in the workforce now who are still earning an income, we need to prioritize our retirement savings as well, because we also know there is a projected deficit in the, or I should say shortfall, in the Social Security Trust Fund, where essentially that trust fund will be depleted by 2033, after which there would be a mandatory cut in benefits of between 20 and 25%.
Yeah, and you know, it's important to pay into the future, but it's hard for some folks to think long-term into the future when they're struggling now. And are you seeing now more or less non-retirees, depending on Social Security, dipping into it early than previous years?
I think we are, and I think that is an unfortunate outcome of the historically high inflation and prices that we've seen in recent years. And, you know, I get it. You know, you take what you need to sort of get by. And when we see that 4 out of 5 current retirees say they are reliant on Social Security to pay necessary expenses, that tells you as much as you need to know. That's a massive cross-section of the American public.
I know that you advocate for maxing out your contributions. Why is that so vitally important? And tell us what that number is for those of us who have a 401k plan available to us. Why is that such an important thing to do?
Yeah. Well, let's define what that is first of all. And people who work full time, typically, particularly for a large employer, have a 401k plan, employer sponsored, meaning the boss pays for it, and they have an employer match. So let's say you put 3 to 5% of your biweekly paycheck in there, the employer matches that. All that goes in before taxes.
Free money.
Exactly. Well, yeah, it's money on the table, right? And so if there's a 20 in front of me and it's up for grabs and I'm not stealing from anybody, I'm going to take it, especially if the boss says you can have it. So yeah, that's a way of trying to make sure we're controlling what we can control. And if Social Security is fixed within the next 10 years, we'll applaud that. If it kind of stays on the same trajectory and elected officials continue not to do the job that they're asked to do, at least we'll have been warned that this is a problem.
Yeah. Mark, good advice, good information here. Thank you for coming on to share your tips with us this morning. Good to talk to you.
We appreciate you.
Thank you.